Hey, it's Soul with I don't have a script. I'm coming into this a little bit unprepared, but I had a question that's been kind of like scratching the back of my head. And here it goes. How will we remember World of Warcraft Shadowlands? Dramatic pause. There's a kind of a phenomenon that happens among, not among everyone, of course, but among WoW players, where we tend to like just loathe and hate the current expansion as it is right now because we're reacting fresh, our emotions are raw, we're feeling all these feelings. But then after a number of years, after we forget about certain things or we just kind of like look back on them and then we see, okay, it was that bad or it wasn't that bad, then we have a bit of clarity. And some would say, not everyone, of course, but some would say, Warlords wasn't that bad. I mean, it had its bad parts, but hey, the rating, oh man, it was great. It was fantastic. I loved it. And of course, some people are like, wow, you have no idea what you're talking about. It was terrible. I didn't raid, and so this and this and this. And so, obviously, Shadowlands is not over yet. We still have a number of weeks to go as we approach like the end of, the race to World First. It's still going on as of this recording. There is still some story left to discover, although, big swaths of it are complete already, and many people have passed their judgment on it. In fact, many people have passed their judgment on the story long ago, but we're going to get to that. But that question of legacy, the question of how will Shadowlands be remembered, it's something that I wanted to speculate on now, mostly for fun. And that's how I want to come off with this. I want to invite everyone into, my headspace, knowing that we're going to disagree. I'm just here to present, a couple of opinions and speculation. And of course, all of you are welcome to share yours as well. There's no wrong answers here. The things that you love or hate, we all want to, it's up to us. All of us are going to have certain viewpoints. All of us have a certain lens that we use to look at this game. Maybe you play, depending on your play style, depending on the class that you play, whether you're in a guild or if you're not, or if you happen to feel really good at the game, or if your class is at a certain, at a certain place. We're all going to remember this and every other expansion a little bit differently. And like I said, I'm just going to share what I'm probably going to feel now for fun. I think the simplest way to put it would be there are things that I'm going to remember fondly and not so fondly. Or maybe I'll just kind of like think of them as forgettable, something like that. I'll start off with a negative, and I feel like I'm not going to look back very favorably on Shadowlands' story. I think this is kind of an easy one, sort of, kind of, maybe. To me, Shadowlands felt, forgettable. It kind of has that Warlords vibe where you and I, the adventurers of champions of whatever the heck, we yeet off into like a fantastically different place. We run off to AU Draenor, or we run off to the afterlife. Things happen there, and then we come back. But then what do we come back to? And, a big thing about the story of Shadowlands is that while there were a lot of things that happened, a lot of it doesn't really have much impact on, the world that I care about more. I care more about Azeroth than the Shadowlands or, existence or whatever. Those are very, high level, they're very abstract things, whereas, I care about what happens on Azeroth. So, like, for example, Battle for Azeroth. King Rastakhan is killed. That felt like a moment. And that moment had reverberating impacts, like politically, across Zandalar and across like some of the story. It elevated Talanji. And, BFA had its problems too. Like, here I am dissing on BFA too. Characters like, I guess notably like Talanji or even Zakan or the folks in Kultiris, we got to explore some of those characters who live on Azeroth, but we didn't really get into it because all of a sudden off to Shadowlands we go. Because apparently Sylvanas was more important. And while we're in the Shadowlands, we got to meet like this whole host of characters, these 4 different realms, these abstract rules, and how this and everything works. But when we return to Azeroth, are we supposed to like kind of, not exactly forget about it, but just kind of dismiss that, in the future, when people die, we know that they're off somewhere else, and we could, if we really wanted to, visit them? Like, how's that going to work in the future? And so there's a lot about the Shadowlands story that it made relative sense, but it doesn't have that sort of impact that makes me care very much about it. Like, I think about the characters that we've met there, and they're all technically dead people. They're not going to follow us to the next adventure. Clay and Pelagos, they're not going to be like, all right, champion, what are we going to do next? Let's do some stuff, something allied races. It's not going to happen. None of that's going to follow us. Pretty much with Draenor, none of it really followed us except for Gul'dan, because you know how that went. But otherwise, there's just very little impact of the Warlords and the Shadowlands story on the greater impact. I don't know what it's going to lead to. And maybe that's a good thing, that it's not going to lead to anything, because, I'm still holding out hope. And, we'll see how this following statement ages. Like, I want to see if the end of this story equates to the end of this saga, this big arc of the World of Warcraft. And are we going to start something like fresh and new with new foundations that forget about the likes of Sylvanas and the Thanos and all the other brouhaha that had happened? See, it's all starting to slip from my brain already. Remember how patch 6.1 was considered to be like one of the worst World of Warcraft patches? I think that's been totally blasted by 9.0.5. I'm pretty certain that is now the worst patch of all time, pretty much. Some folks remember 6.1 as the selfie patch, the Twitter patch, which the Twitter stuff, it's still used by people who use Twitter, who are also a small percentage of WoW players, but still, it's still a feature that's used more than voice chat. Hey yo. But to me, 6.1 was also when Blood Elves, the high res models, when those were brought in. And that was huge for me, at least, and other Blood Elf players. Some of the collection stuff that was added to the patch as well, and that felt cool. It saved a bunch of inventory space. It's opened up, later content to include all sorts of different toys. Now there's like a bajillion toys, and thanks to the collections tab, now we can hold on to all this sort of stuff. Of course, with the weird restrictions with reputation and everything, but overall that felt like a really good plus. 6.1 felt like it added things, whereas 9.0.5 was doing its best to play catch up after an already 1 month delay of Shadowlands. And 9.05, what did that mostly add? Off the top of my head, at least, that added the Valor point stuff to an already running season of Mythic Plus, which really woulda, shoulda been in from the start. And maybe if it was, it would have felt like a little bit better, and maybe the team could have reiterated on Valor points a little bit more. But we got what we got, and that was really it. 905, to me, it represents the delay that had to happen, but it didn't happen, and we paid the price for it. And I think that left a really, really bitter taste on folks' mouths, because we were still waiting. And there was a lot of lost goodwill, that among other things, but having something to look forward to and getting just that instead of like a 9.1 or getting something a bit more substantive in 905, that was really harmful. Something that I think will be fondly remembered about Shadowlands, I hope, is that it marks what I feel like is a really strong turn from Blizzard towards having more things that are account-wide. We got like a little tiny taste of it during Mists when, hey, we got to Revered, now our alts get a reputation boost. Whoop-de-doo. We got a little bit more of that with collections. I just mentioned that, with transmog and toys and mounts and other such things. But we started to get more of we got a lot of discourse on that too. We got a lot of folks bitching for account wide, like as much as they can get away with. And we got a taste of that from the very start with Threads of Fate, which I think was fantastic. It wasn't perfect, but over time, as usual, as the WoW team refined things and made things cooler, it did feel cool. And it let people get their characters up like way faster than before. I wonder if this is going to be not exactly at the start, because they've been doing that like incrementally, but I wonder if it's going to keep going in this direction to a point where there is going to be like account level stuff happening. The best that we have right now are account wide tradable things. And maybe it's an engine thing. Maybe there are certain technical limitations that prevent us from having like bona fide account wide like currencies or other such things. Like we have something like Honor, although that's really soft. Honor is just like a level, like a level gain system, and we get cool prizes out of it, and Honor is shared across the account. Whoop-de-doo. But yeah, that's not very. It's not exactly what folks are looking for. Folks are looking for, I want to get reputation on one character, and I want that to be shared across like all of them. I want to be able to just get those rewards, for everybody, like at the same time. And there have been different ways that the WoW team has been compensated for that by making the rewards themselves account wide, because they'll put exalted rewards on, that they'll make those like cosmetics, tabards, mounts, and other such things. But I don't think that's going to be like the big positive takeaway that people are going to remember Shadowlands for. I think more than anything, and maybe this will be hard for everyone to see because the nature of people who watch YouTube videos play at a certain level, but I feel like people who do solo content, I think they're going to look at Shadowlands as one of the definitely better expansions that gave them, at least, a lot more to do and a lot more to work for. Like I've been saying this a bunch of times, that there is so much freaking transmog and pets and mounts and weapon things, and there's so much to look for. And I think back to previous expansions. I think back to Legion and Battle for Azeroth and Warlords, and I don't recall having this much stuff that I could work towards. When it comes to these cosmetics, I feel like this is not the casuals, but this is definitely like the transmoggers sort of expansion. And it's sort of a double-edged sword too, because there's so much and it takes a considerable amount of work in order to obtain it. But because of the nature that it's cosmetic, I feel like, well, I'm not going to be that sympathetic, not even to myself, that, oh man, it's going to be a long time to like collect everything. And kind of to Blizzard's credit, like right from the get-go, they've set up this whole kind of evergreen sort of dealie with doing errands or doing these kinds of activities that have very little to nothing to do with item level. You're still going to be putting in a modicum of effort and skill and time into obtaining all these things, and it feels like it shows. I've never felt like I've had so much transmog stuff to play with in other expansions, and it's not just, oh, the stuff looks better here than it does in Legion or in BFA or whatever. There's just a lot, and I feel like that's going to be the lasting thing about Shadowlands. It's going to be the thing that keeps giving, in terms of, oh yeah, I haven't done that yet. There's still a little bit more for me to do. Oh, I haven't even done Kyrian for my male wearing people, and some of the Kyrian stuff might look cool, maybe. We all have different tastes, right? But I think that's going to be the biggest positive takeaway from Shadowlands. It's a little controversial, but I think back to how we prepared our characters in different expansions. I'm thinking of like this current generation, and by that I mean Legion, Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands. I feel like Shadowlands is the easier out of the three. I think of, the discourse now. People are like, oh man, I gotta get them conduits and I gotta get that gear and I gotta make them legendaries. Oh man, that's really tough. It's so much work. But I also have not so fond memories during Legion and Battle for Azeroth of, boy, I really hope I get that Titan Forge baby, or oh man, am I gonna get the legendary this time? I think my this bad luck protection is gonna rubber band. What am I gonna get? Sephu's let's go. Nope. And there's a lot of that. And that's the difference, I believe, when it comes to, Shadowlands versus BFA and Legion, that those previous expansions, they relied a lot on randomness, and it relied a lot on RNG. Some people got lucky and like, hey, that was great. Some people made 4 or 5 characters because they wanted to hope that their character would get like the legendary thing, and cool, this is going to be my character now because they rolled the right thing. But you know what? Maybe they could have gotten the better version of the thing, and hey, this person got the Arcano Crystal or whatever it was called. Yay! Titan Forging. Shadowlands had, I guess, the grind. You knew how much work it was going to take. And it's funny because I remember talking about that during Battle for Azeroth and Legion. It's like, hey, here, the alternative, guys, would be to get these deterministic rewards that you can plan for, you can, schedule things out, and you knew when you were going to get them. And, folks had tried to talk that up as, hey, Blizzard, that's what we want. That's what we want. And in Shadowlands, Blizzard was like, all right, this is what you get. Forget Titan Forging, none of that super RNG stuff. It was still around, but it was kind of limited. And now you want your legendary, this is what you got to do. And you have full agency, you can do what you want. Here you go. And not everyone hated it. Not everyone loved it, though, that's for sure. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword when you know what you need to do, but you know what you need to do when you're like, oh man, and that can feel pretty discouraging. So maybe the takeaway that some people will walk away from is that, hey, Blizz, it's cool that you didn't throw RNG on this, but the grind was just way too long. And maybe that's it. Maybe the grind was just too long. I don't think anyone's going to forgive Blizzard about the 3-season expansion sort of dealie. And there's probably going to be conspiracies about it. I think that's Denuser and Hazakastas, that they try to reassure players or to try to dispel the myths that Shadowlands was going to be a 4-season patch. Oh, I'm sorry, 4-season expansion with another thing going on. It's funny that they used, I believe, the same phrasing, that this was always meant to be a 3-part story. And that makes it suspicious. Like, conspiracy theories abound. We're going to look back on Shadowlands and wonder what was missed. What was the Farallon of Shadowlands? My theory is that it has something to do with Gallywix. It might have something to do with Anduin and what could have been. And this is... It's especially because Ian addressed it specifically. It's like, hey, content creators had predicted that, hey, Anduin was going to be part of the actual 9.2, Jailers was 9.3. Something tells me that they were kind of getting warm there. It's unfortunate because admitting, or at least stating, that Shadowlands was only meant to be this long anyway, it sort of underlines what I was talking about a little bit earlier, that the story was just weak because it didn't give a chance to even try to. It did try to, but it didn't do a good enough effort to connect us to these characters that we were meeting. These covenants, and it made it that much harder to care. There's always going to be that what if. What if there was no pandemic? What if Blizzard had the time to flesh things out the way that they wanted to and let themselves, respond to feedback that the way that they could have? Of course, what would things be like if there was no harassing and, none of that stuff going on? I think to TLDR this, because I really should TLDR this. I've been really ranty on this one. I think people will remember Shadowlands, as a double-edged sort of thing. Fondly, not so fondly. they're going to see that there was a lot of cool things to like farm for. And perhaps people will see those things and be like, oh man, I should go back. You know, kind of like how people go back to island expedition to be like, oh, since I can solo that stuff now I can get all this cool transmog. But then that's like, you know, a handful of stuff compared to the tidal wave of different things that you can get all throughout Shadowlands, from not just the covenants, but like, you know, the raids and the zone content, and not so much the dungeon content. Ooh, that was a dog. But there's just a lot there that will keep giving, I think, for years to come. But there's a lot that Shadowlands is going to be infamous for. Like, I didn't mention Torghast, but, you know, some of the failures of, you know, in systems, or, you know, the real big shortcomings, like Torghast, that didn't work out. The Maw, people wanted to have... Remember how people wanted to have, oh, we need tougher zone content, Blizz. You know, outdoor content, it's so easy. It needs to be tougher. Here you go, guys. Oh, no, not like that. Not like that, guys. But the story will definitely be one of the, I guess, the most controversial or the most trashed on legacies of Shadowlands, because it took such an important element of the Warcraft universe and didn't do a whole lot for it. It didn't do the Warcraft story any favors by coming into the Shadowlands, unfortunately. So that's my rant to share. Maybe I'll talk with folks on stream next chance I get, and of course I invite you to share your own. You know, what do you think that you folks will remember from Shadowlands, you know, years from now? The good and the bad. I want to hear it. Maybe you can like this video. I don't think this was a very good one. Subscribe for more, though. Maybe I can make up for it with something better. And I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.